Welcome to our latest edition of our Cybersecurity podcast. My name is Brian Powell. I am the Network Department Manager and Ethical Hacker here at PCA Technology Group.
And I'm Dr. Erickson Nealons, a neuroscience specialist with APA Solutions and specializing in how we work, right, as people and the science behind being human. And today, Brian, I'm really excited to talk with you more than about something that's gained a lot of awareness, certainly over the last months, years, is related then to passwords and how easy it is for criminals, hackers to get access then to some of these default passwords. I think there's a lot of attention that we've seen in media about how many people, even in higher positions, that may literally have password as their password, or 1, 2, 3, 4, something to this effect, that a simple algorithm, Raspberry Pi, or other different types of plugins that hackers seem to be able then to crack pretty easily. And so love to hear your take as it relates then to passwords. I know there's a lot that you've taught me, especially about then the different alphanumeric, but also symbols, capitalization, lowercase, and how there is really an exponential increase in time it takes some of these algorithms to solve those passwords. So, Brian, what are your thoughts then as it relates to passwords at this point?
Yeah, so let's start at the foundational level here, and just, the human tendency is obviously to pick something easy to remember, or reuse your password so you don't have to remember every password for everything you log into. I mean, let's face it, we live in a digital age right now where everything's tied to a login and password. So the ease of using a very easy password or the same password across multiple sites is pretty commonplace, and I think a natural tendency for the human brain to fall into.
You're absolutely right. I mean, in terms of how we operate, we're habits by nature. I mean, that's something that I think you could say across the board in terms of what it means to be human, right? There's things that we do every day, and we don't even largely pay attention to them. We wake up, we have a routine about how we get dressed, how we eat. And, the brain really prefers that kind of very automatic, implicit, very heuristic way of responding. And I would imagine in your space as well, you see this happen with computer usage, smart device uses, and especially as it relates to passwords. The idea in my head, conceptually, I have a concept of password, and the easier, the simpler, the more relevant I can make it, it's that much easier for me then to continue doing it, right? It's a habit, and it's hard for us to get out of those habits. And so the idea when we're prompted to make a new password, that alone is jarring. And then on top of that, having to think of one that is unique and still be able to remember it, it's a lot, right? It's overwhelming. It's very tasking then for our brain to have to do that. So I understand it, but from what it sounds like and what you're sharing with me, if we continue to rely on using those same passwords, just like how maybe our existing diet or workout routine isn't necessarily healthy for us, we may need to change it. And just like with that, maybe passwords need to change too. So what is it that you see in terms of changing passwords? And if we have to change one, how do we make it then secure?
So obviously our recommendation is to not use the same password across multiple sites. They should be unique. So every login that you should have a unique password tied to that login. And we also recommend that they're complex. And what complex means is we recommend at least 9 characters at a minimum. So it's got to be a 9-digit password. Within those 9 digits, you should be using some type of special character, like a symbol or something like that, like a dollar sign, an ampersand, the pound sign, also an uppercase, and also a number. So that in and of itself adds a lot of complexity, which makes a lot of these automated utilities that are designed to crack simple passwords very easily. It adds a lot more complexity to that. So instead of instantaneously with one of these automated tools, if you've got a 6-digit number, I mean, on my cell phone, I can actually brute force that password in under 30 seconds, a 6-digit number. So, I mean, you can see how fast this happens. So, by adding this 9-digit minimum and all these special characters, it pushes that process out a little further, and you need pretty high-end equipment to be able to kind of brute force or break, figure out that password if someone was trying to do that.
Yeah, I remember you were telling me, and I think the numbers here are just almost astronomically challenging to even fathom, right? Weren't you were saying that if it is just a random number sequence, right? It's a few seconds that this plugin, right, could largely then decipher what exactly this password is. But even, what was it, a alphanumeric password is also something that can be cracked within, what would you say? Was it a few minutes?
It's still 6-digit. It's under a minute still on a cell phone.
Okay. I mean, that's the thing, right? It's on a cell phone. So that if someone now is on a computer or something that has a bit more processing power, you're probably talking about almost instantaneous, unfathomable perception of time.
Exactly.
Now, on the other side of it, right, you were mentioning about, what was it, 9 characters, and they have a special symbol, uppercase, lowercase, numbers included. What then ends up being the crack time for there? Wasn't it? It's long, right?
It's longer, yeah. It's multiple weeks, also months. It could take months too, depending on how your passwords are used, and how you're mixing in the characters there. If you're mixing more than one and things like that, it could astronomically push that out further. So the idea is that normally at 9 digits with complex, it puts you roughly at about an average of 4 months to brute force that. And if you're following the procedure of changing your password every 3 months, by the time they guess that password, you have already changed it. So it's a constant cat and mouse game where now they got to guess your new password and hope they get it before you change it again. So it makes it much more difficult to brute force something like that.
And so you're saying here it's a combination not only of the complexity of the password, but also getting into the routine of changing those passwords regularly as well. Correct. And do you have a certain cycle that you recommend for people then to go through about how often, is it kind of like my clocks, here in our Western New York region, where fall back, spring forward? Do you have a certain timeline that you recommend that people change their passwords?
Yeah, I like 3 months. Most organizations try to adopt the 3 months, but if that is too quick, you could opt to 6 months, but you're opening yourself up to a potential more risk by the 6 months than you would by the 3 months.
Okay. So I guess it's interesting, right? And it's not having to then set our reminders, because in terms of how we operate, it's probably something that until it becomes a habit, it's going to be really hard for me to commit time and energy to remember to do this.
Correct.
And have you seen anything that's catchy? Because again, I'm thinking of the brain's perspective here, and something that's meaningful, something that's short, something that is relevant, more likely to remind individuals then to go forward with doing this planning to then set their passwords on this regular cycle. Anything that you've seen in your space that really is effective?
Well, from a business side, a lot of times what we try to do is instill this procedure onto the management level, so they understand the complications and risks of not doing this. And usually what happens is we end up setting it as a company policy. So the server itself will actually prompt you on a quarterly basis to change your password. So you'll get a prompt automatically from the system at that point, because we configured it that way. That seems to be the best route to go, as long as you get management buy-in, that hey, this is something that we want to make sure we're doing. That's usually the approach we take, and try to instill.
So the idea that there's almost a champion within the organization of saying, hey, we need to make sure to set these, right? Just like how we may with regards to compliance and training related to there. So that's perfect. That's right. I think something that really has happened, because otherwise I could see it's natural for a human being to be like, why do I need to do this extra step, right? You're telling me I need to change my habit, and it's already challenging enough, and pay attention to it. How am I going to remember to do this?
Yep.
So it seems like some of the takeaways here is that identify that champion within the organization, have a sustainable timeline in which you're going to be able to update these and make them complex. Now, is there a way that I can help my brain to be able to remember these? Because I can imagine that it's like, well, hold on, I got used to using these ones for so long. I'm going to keep typing that one in likely. So how do I then make sure that I'm using the right one, not going back to what I was used to doing?
So that's a great segue into the next area of this is like, okay, you're telling me what I need to do. That's great. Okay, now I'm doing it. Now how in the world am I going to remember, 10,000 passwords for all these different sites? They're all different, this and that. It's crazy. There's no way I'm going to do it. And that's why they tend to rely on easy to remember passwords, because it's second nature for them. So in this case, I'm a big advocate of actually recording your passwords, and I know that goes against the grain on a lot of people. They say don't write your passwords down. I actually am a big fan of writing your passwords down, but I do it in such a way that I'm not recording the entire or the correct password, but I know what it is. So let me just kind of explain a little bit what I'm talking about. So if I take a piece of paper and I start writing down all of my passwords on it, for each login that I have, what I will do is I will either add additional characters that I know aren't the password, and I'll skip them when I go to write it, or when I go to enter it in the site, or I will have missing characters that I also know what they are, that aren't on that piece of paper that I know I need to add when I go to enter that password. So, with the extra characters, it's pretty easy. You can, you come up with the pattern. It could be two at the beginning, two at the end, one at the beginning, one at the end, whatever it is. The one thing I will say is if you're adding characters and you're recording those characters on paper, don't use the same characters that you're adding. So in other words, if let's say you're adding two characters, one at the beginning, one at the end, don't use A at the beginning and B at the end for every one of your passwords, because there's software out there that will actually, you can run those passwords through and it will recognize the pattern and actually tell you that that's the additional characters that don't match. So, just randomize those characters, but hey, every character, the first letter and the last letter, I got to peel off, and my real password is the ones in between those.
Got it. So if I made it where there's a rule that says, all right, in my mind, the first two at the beginning and end two, no matter what they are, right? They could be a character, they could be a letter, they could be a number, making it random. But as long as I know in my mind that those are the ones that are kind of the dummy pieces of this, that then is going to help prevent the likelihood of being able then to have us be hacked in terms of that password.
Correct. Yep. And if someone comes across that piece of paper, they're going to see all those passwords. They're going to try them and realize they don't work and think it's an old password list and just give up, because they're not going to know that those passwords aren't being recorded entirely. So
now, what about systems that have it where you're only able then to attempt so many different times before you get locked out of that system? I think there's some people probably listening to this being like, well, why do I need to do all this? It's that if I have all these different dummy things and they try 2 times, well, they're going to get locked out. And so right. What do we then say about those sites? Is that something that I don't need to worry then as much about, or do I need to have just as much concern about those types of sites?
I would say, just as general practice, most sites do have a lockout period where they'll keep you locked out. And the idea of that is to keep someone from randomly guessing your password. And obviously they build a little buffer in there for people that, oh my gosh, I have my cap lock key on, or oh darn, when I was typing, I accidentally slipped and hit the key next to the one I was supposed to hit. So they do add a little buffer in there for human error. Mm-hmm. But the idea behind most of those settings is to stop the automated attacks. Because otherwise, if they didn't, basically, as fast as I can break it on my cell phone, I could set up a guessing pattern that will hit that site just as fast and try to brute force the password at the site level. So that's the idea behind why they do that lock, after X amount of attempts, and then they usually keep you from logging in for a 30 period, so that extrapolates that whole guessing game out exponentially because of that.
So not necessarily relying on it, but knowing that you have a additional layer of protection to help you. Exactly. So the idea being, if you do these techniques and you get into these habits, these are going to be some additional buffers to help you and to help keep then your account safe.
Correct. And the other thing to add on to that too, one that I would highly recommend, there's something called Multifactor. And basically what Multifactor is, it's an additional protection for your passwords. So when you log into a site with your password, obviously you put your login in, you put your password in, and then what it'll do, it'll ask you for another method of authentication. So usually what multi-factor is, it's something you know and something you have. The something you know is your password and login. The something you have is usually it is tied to your cell phone, where it's looking for a 6-digit code or something. So without that cell phone, they'll never get that other piece of the puzzle. So even if your password were to be compromised, without that cell phone piece, it would be very difficult to get in. Now, it's not 100% foolproof, but it's pretty good. It stops about 99% of the hacking attempts by using multi-factor. So, like I said, it's not completely foolproof, but at least it does add that additional layer of protection that you could set up with your account. That way, you have your password and you have your cell phone. So it's definitely usually the person that's entering it.
I know our time is short, but for those that listened to our other segment about then social media use, it does seem like there's a lot of attention about how social media, as we talked about last time, can guide hackers, criminals towards what those passwords are. And so anything that you feel that is important to tie into then what we're here mentioning today as it relates then to safe social media use.
Yeah, I mean, ultimately, for people that are heavy onto social media, as we mentioned before, just be careful what you're posting on there. There's a lot of surveys out there. There's a lot of information that's posted out there. I mean, you may not even realize it, not to go down the rabbit hole, but I noticed a lot of the parents are posting pictures of their kids with the little boards that show, but it's my first day of second grade and my teacher is this and my favorite color is this, my favorite food is this, well, guess what? You just gave away all your child's password hints for 10 years down the road, because I'm just going to store that in a database and go back and do some research on what the name was, I know your second grade teacher, a lot of those are password reset questions. So be careful what you're posting on there, and don't use, easy passwords that are tied to anything that may be publicly available, your husband's name, things like that. Come up with unique passwords, whether it's a generator that you find online to create those, or whatever. Just be very careful.
Such valuable information. And for those who haven't already, take a listen then to that previous recording related then to social media use, and I think that'll also help, as it's our goal here as we're talking about cybersecurity and how it's related to the human behavior, the science behind that, and certainly with Brian's expertise in that space to then provide each of us with the best ways possible to be able to then keep our accounts safe and be secure as best as we can in this ever-evolving cyberspace. So Brian, I learned again so much from you here today, and look forward to hearing more from you in the future.
Absolutely. Stay tuned for our next podcast, and I'm sure we'll go even deeper into some of this stuff. So thanks for listening.